I think Gen Zs now are very happy to kind of embrace solo living, and it's much more framed around empowerment. There's this idea of being solo as a choice of self-love, kind of autonomy, self-fulfillment. So the language around solo living has really changed, even if solo living isn't new.
Globally, single-person households have doubled since the 1970s. So why are more people living alone, and what are the consequences for the world we live in? Alison Ho, Asia Futures and Cultural Strategist at WGSN, joins to discuss why, the consequences, and how the pop culture version of solo living aligns with reality, with a real focus on Eastern Asia. I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN, the world's leading trend forecasting company. You're listening to Lives of Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast about how we'll live our lives in the future. Alison, welcome back to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you again. For people who maybe didn't tune in last time you were on the podcast, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. It's really good to be back. I'm Alison Ho. I'm an Asia Futures and Cultural Strategist at WGSN. And that means, I basically have my eye on everything from consumer lifestyles, retail and marketing, and all across APAC. Thanks for having me back, Carla. Really excited to dive into our topic for today.
We're really focusing on new living styles, specifically in Asia, but I'm always interested in how they might be mirroring or leading the rest of the world. So that's the kind of lens we're going through. And it really came from a forecast that you authored recently called the APAC Solo Living Forecast. And in that, you wrote about this rising number of young people in APAC that are basically challenging the more traditional norms of family and that kind of communal orientated living in favor of solo lifestyle. So where did the research come from, and what are you saying in this forecast?
Asia and East Asia in particular has traditionally been kind of had a society and culture built around, what we term like the family clan. So in this sort of context, the individual is really seen in relation to the family, the extended family, and then friends and wider society. And I think that really explains this kind of traditional pressure that's been put on, both men and women to marry and start and build families. It's just this expectation that, the stronger, the larger the family unit, the more support and bonds you'll have with society. And that's just kind of the larger social context around it. But I think this is something that's fundamentally changing with the younger generation, something that they're really kind of rethinking, challenging. And you really see this over the past 20 years. You have, across all Asian markets, the average size of households has just gotten smaller and smaller. So couples were first having less children and then no children. And now you're seeing like no couples even, just a lot of solo dwellers.
Yeah, it is interesting. And again, coming at this with my more Western view, that some of this might sound kind of normal. We've certainly seen this in other parts of the world. But I think in other parts of the world, you're now seeing maybe a kind of flip back to traditional family values, or certainly traditional family values being not necessarily reflected necessarily everywhere in society, but certainly now seen as something to be quite aspirational. So we're kind of moving at slightly different paces. And I do think the stats sometimes are telling a slightly different story from what we might be reading about in the press. So tell me from the Asia perspective, what you're seeing now and where you think that's going.
Right. So I think where we're at now is quite an interesting period. So like you said, when we compare it to the West, it's definitely, you read a lot about how Americans, for example, where, solo living has been the most popular setup, they're kind of reverting back to living with their parents. And then here in Asia, it's really the other way around. And I think it has a lot to do with how economies have shifted, opportunities for women have shifted. And I'm a sociologist, economist by training, so that's kind of how, my lens for seeing the world. And I think one of the biggest changes you've seen is the growth of the Asian markets and economies, right? And with that is also the opportunity for women to go to school, build a career. And I think that's been very fundamental to this solo living trend. A lot of times in the past, women had to depend on marriage and their husbands for their livelihoods. My aunt, for example, the expectation was, after you finish secondary school, if you're not, if, essentially you're going to get married. So there's no point to keep studying. versus my father or my uncle, for example, who had that kind of opportunity, but also that motivation to do it. So I think that's just one generation ago. So that's in terms of timeline, that's where we're at.
Asia's obviously a huge region. There are different cultures, different customs. Are there similarities you're seeing? And I guess from what you've just said, that's a sort of broad brushstroke. Is it the same across every part of Asia, or is it differing?
Yeah, I mean, Asia is so big and diverse and complex, so definitely not the same, but I think you do see pockets. I think East Asia especially is at the forefront of this, and I think, going back to what I was saying before, it makes sense from a development stage point of view, where, it's a lot of these East Asian tiger economies that have really kind of industrialized first, got their girls to schools first, being more open about women in the workplace as well. So I think that's the commonality. We're going to start seeing that in Southeast Asia, especially in the large urban centers. So I think Bangkok, for example, is one of those places where solo households are also on the rise. But that's not to say, it's the same in rural parts of Thailand or the rest of Southeast Asia. So I think, again, kind of going back to my thesis, it's really about the development stage and then also the role of women and the opportunity that they have to kind of stand on their own feet, basically.
Is it being accepted or even celebrated across multiple different generations? Or are you seeing this being sort of pioneered by a younger generation and an older generation trying to resist it? Or across the board, are people open to this?
You know who's trying to resist it? It's the governments that are really worried. So Japan, South Korea, China, and here in Singapore as well, fertility rates have just been plummeting to record lows like every single year. Right? I think South Korea's was like 0.74 and Singapore's was 0.95, so below one. And there's a lot of concern about population replacement, labor shortages, that sort of stuff. So the governments are definitely worried. In terms of generations, I have this story that illustrates this really. So I was having lunch with a group of family friends, right? And so it's my parents, their parents, and then some friends my age and little, so like millennials and Gen Z children. And one of them remarked like, my daughter, she's not trying to find a boyfriend. She seems like she's just, staying single. Is something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Was there something wrong with my parenting? And so there are those sentiments, but then the other parents quickly jumped in to say, hey, no, it's a different generation now. Like the children have their own lives, they're independent, they can make their own decisions. So I think, especially when you think about the Gen X's and the boomers, they're in sort of transitory phase, right? Because their children are the one that are kind of challenging traditional norms, and then they're having to wrap their heads around it. So I think it's kind of everyone's in this strange transition place thinking about what this means, what the children are doing, and if it's something that, is positive or negative. I think the society as a whole is still kind of working through it.
Is it an obsession of society? Is it something that you're seeing being written about in the mainstream press yet?
Absolutely. It's definitely being covered in the mainstream press from very different angles. So a lot of them point to, the fears around population decline, aging population, labor shortages. That's one. But then there's also a lot of opportunity around it. So there's, the rise of, in China, they're calling the companionship economy. It's a big booming market. So there are opportunities there. And I think in general, just definitely on the mind of press people. It comes up in conversation. So on everyone's mind, really.
No, tell me about the companionship economy. That sounds intriguing.
So the companionship economy it's not super new. So in Japan, this has been something that's been going on for a while, like rent a family type of thing, rent a friend. It's not super mainstream, but then now because solo living is so much, I guess it's more accepted, it's more of a norm. You're really starting to see people becoming more open to both demanding as well as servicing companionship. So it's really companionship as a service. And fun fact, I think in China, this economy is like a few hundred billion yuan. So that's at least, I think seven or 9 billion US dollars. So it's a huge, huge market. And includes everything from like having someone to eat with to like having someone to hike with. Whatever you need, there's it's just finding a companion. So that's what it is, and it really services that need for connection, I think.
And is that seen in a positive way? Because that could be twisted on its head, seem kind of quite tragic that you don't have anyone, even a friend, to do that with, and you have to perhaps spend money to have someone to do that? Or is it seen as empowering?
I think, again, it's one of those things that, society's still trying to work through. So I was in Shanghai alone recently for a work trip, right? And one of the services that was available, and this is informal, there's no like marketplace for this, is on social media. You have a lot of people ask for something that's called 搭子, which just means a companion, basically someone to accompany you do things. And it's very common for people to just post on Xiaohongshu saying, hey, I'm gonna be in Shanghai on this day. I want to visit this bar, but I'm alone. Anyone want to come? It's very common. I was thinking about that. I was like, is this safe? Like, how
Yeah,
trustworthy
that's
is this?
exactly what's going through my head at the moment. That sounds fraught with potential problems.
Exactly. So I asked one of my Chinese friends, I was like, hey, is this like an actual thing? Or is this a scam? Am I going to get kidnapped? And what she told me was, she's done this when she visits Hong Kong on work trips. It's very common. And the way to weed out like potential danger is to be really specific about what you're looking for. So you can ask for coffee chats. It can be as diverse as like what we would use LinkedIn for, to ask for career-driven type of coffee chats. Or you could say, hey, I'm in the trend forecasting industry. I'm looking to check trends with someone who has their eye on China or whatever. And the more specific you are, the more likely it is that you kind of weed out the more dangerous sorts of personalities. So it is a thing. And my Chinese friend was very surprised at kind of my
You're
concern with
reticent.
how dangerous
Yeah.
it was.
How amazing. Okay, that's fascinating. Okay, so let's go back to, so we've talked about how the older generations are sort of grappling with this. What about younger generations? Is there a difference between how millennials are tackling this and Gen Z? And dare I say, is this something that Gen Alpha are going to push even further?
Yeah, I think from a generational point of view, I would say it's really among the millennials, it wasn't that common yet. You had those sorts of people who were not resisting, but I guess not opting for marriage. But even 5 years ago, it was kind of seen as there were negative connotations around kind of being single. And in China and in Japan as well, there were phrases you would use, quite negative phrases, to describe people who were single past, what was perceived as like the marriageable age, which is somewhere like 27 years old.
Oh wow, so
Um,
young, really young.
Very
Well,
young. Yeah,
from
I
my
think that would,
from my Western view, that
yeah,
I would say that was young. Yeah.
yeah. I think in Asia, typically, if 30 is the age where you kind of get a bit anxious about, marriage, kids, and that sort of thing. So I think Gen Zs now are very happy to kind of embrace solo living, and it's much more framed around empowerment. There's this idea of being solo as a choice of self-love, kind of autonomy, self-fulfillment. So the language around solo living has really changed, even if solo living isn't new.
Got you. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, we're going to just pause there. And I'm going to send you some quick fire questions just to get to know
Go
you a
for
little
it.
bit
Yeah,
better. And then we will come back to the topic in hand. So,
love that.
number one, most used app on your phone.
Oh, this has changed recently. I think if you asked me like 2 months ago, before I went to China, it might have been TikTok. Now that I'm back from China, it's actually Xiaohongshu or Red Note in English.
Ah, okay. So why have you changed? Because I found that quite
Well,
fascinating.
first, when I was in China, there was, the big firewall that I had to contend
Yeah.
with.
Yep.
And then TikTok was off the table. And that really forced me to explore the Chinese apps in greater depth. And what I found with Xiaohongshu is that it's essentially, what we were talking about. It's a community, or it's actually, it's a social media platform, obviously, but it's where communities can be built, especially around hobbies, interests, specific lifestyles. So I'm not sure if you used the app before, but it's kind of, think of Instagram combined with Pinterest, combined with TikTok. It's all of those things, and you have videos, you have images, but it's built around specific lifestyles. So you go in and say, for example, places in Shanghai for coffee lovers or something like that. And it would have all these Pinterest-like posts that come out. So it's great for exploring new places. It's also great for meeting new people. finding out about brand activations, fun things to do with weekend, really all of that. Super fun app. I think they've just released like English translations for it. So for those people who haven't had a play with it, I would recommend it.
Amazing. Okay, fascinating. Daily routine you can't miss.
It has to be my coffee. Boring answer, but very necessary.
We like honest answers. Text or phone call?
Oh, I'm gonna be quite Gen Z on this one. It's gonna be text. And you have to text me before you call me too, just to give me a heads up that you're calling me. Yeah.
Would you rather a solo concert or solo cinema trip?
Oh, both. I've done both.
Okay.
I would really
You're
love
very
it,
happy
recommend
doing
it.
either of those.
Yeah.
Very happy
Yeah.
doing it. Amazing. What about solo restaurant?
Done it before. I love it. It's really kind of, to bring it back, what we're talking about, it's the idea of solitude as very freeing. It's freedom, space for myself to think, space for myself to just chill.
Okay. And final one, what's the most intriguing story or topic you've come across recently?
Oh, also related to solo living, actually, AI companionship.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe
we can talk. We can unpack it later. Yeah.
Let's now unpack that and go as we look into the kind of the future world of solo living and the impact it's going to have. So, what do you think this is going to have? This topic that we're talking about, how is that going to impact our lives in the future?
One thing I should probably stress is I'm not. I have a partner, so I'm not a typical like solo household kind of situation. But because being alone is being reframed in more positive and empowering messages, people are more willing to do things alone as well. So one of the big knock-on effects we're discussing is that you have people now who are from traditional households or have partners, but are very willing to do things alone. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I can see that.
I think exactly. So solo cinema trips, going to a solo concert, that's going to be normalized more and more, which means that you're not just catering to solo dwellers, you're also catering to all these other groups of people who aren't traditional solo dwellers, but are open to doing solo activities.
Yeah, but the kind of bigger piece on that is actually that it can change relationships as well because
Mm,
it's more accepted. So there isn't necessarily the pressure on or the need to do things together. Because
exactly.
if you have gone through that period where that's been really celebrated, you're going to want to hold on to that, even if you are in a romantic relationship,
Yeah.
perhaps. Do you think that, maybe one of the reasons that AI has been sort of embraced so much in Asia is because of this acknowledgement that it will be needed because of the ages and the populations? Or do you think the two things have just run alongside each other and then that will help with this, this population? I was going to use the word crisis, but I don't think I necessarily see it that way, but
Yeah.
population issue that is
Yeah.
coming at us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really the first case where it's kind of looking to technology as a solution. And I think that's generally, again, kind of having those cross-cultural comparisons is one of the areas where I think Asia has always diverged from the West. The relationship with technology, it's always been kind of embraced with open arms, for better or for worse, but always being embraced with open arms. And that's, again, exactly what you're saying. We're really looking to not just AI, but also robotics to solve a lot of these labor challenges. And I was just writing a new report about value retail in Asia. And macroeconomics not doing so well right now. There's really a need for retailers, not just value retailers, but especially value retailers, to find efficiencies both like on the top line as well as the bottom line. And one of the easiest, not cheapest, but easiest way to do it is by automating things. So autonomous warehouses, experimenting with drones for deliveries, that's already been happening quite a lot in Asia, especially in China. So one of the examples was Meituan, which is this food delivery app in China. They've just started the first kind of drone delivery route it's in the Hong Kong region. And it basically has this drone that flies across the sea and completes a delivery in like less than one third of the time it would require of someone to go by land. So you're already seeing these things kind of happening in China and Asia, Japan. So yeah, I think it's really the first case where we're looking to see how AI can come and solve a lot of these challenges.
So that's a kind of segue into your point about
Mhm.
AI companionship. So let's talk about
Right.
that because this is intriguing, again, raises eyebrows. I think people are sort of fascinated by it. So give me your take on this.
AI companionship. Open your minds here. It's gonna be one of those really strange things. I think it's been embraced, you know. So let me start with something that maybe is more palatable. The idea of live streams, live stream sales, live streams. I've become quite a good, like, big fan of it, especially during my time in China. And when it comes to live stream sales, you might be thinking in the past it was a lot of showing a product and then just telling you the benefits of the product and being like, hey, there's a 10% discount on this. It's not the case anymore. When you look at the live stream sellers that are really kind of rising to the forefront right now, it's people who are just having conversations and then they're selling as a side thing. So
Okay.
one of the best examples, my favorite example, there's this Chinese comedian called Li Dan, and he's on Xiaohongshu, really kind of broke out as this unexpected live stream star because all he does is answer questions that come in. So people will write. It's kind of like you know, back in the day when magazines had help, like
Yeah,
help
yeah, yeah.
section,
Like
but you'll write.
agony
It's
aunts type thing.
exactly, yeah, yeah, it's exactly like that. So people will write in, and he will respond to them. So it's really funny, you know, he's really funny. He's just responding to questions, live questions from people, and then he's selling on the side. So it's really that sort of thing where, you know, someone who's living alone would just watch it for entertainment. If they're feeling like it, they'll write in, and then you have someone responding to them in real time as a friend would. So that's kind of, I guess, the easier kind of palatable version of companionship, like digital companionship. Let's start there. And then AI really is just a different version of that. It's having, you know, conversation with someone in real time, whether it's an AI-powered avatar or it's just ChatGPT. It's just having someone to be there for you to answer specific questions that you have, or if you just want to rant, someone to be a listening ear. One other thing from my trip in China recently is a lot of these smart hotels now have something called 小度. This is, I think it's from Baidu, and it's this AI hotel assistant. So when you walk into the room, it'll be like, "Welcome back." You know how this is the, or it will say like, "This is the weather for today. This is what you have to bear in mind for tomorrow," and you can ask it questions. So some things that I ask it are like, "Tell me about the history of this city," especially when I'm visiting somewhere new. And it's just like having, you know, real time radio podcast situation, giving you a response to whatever question that you have. So it's not as insidious as like, you know, someone who's like watching every move that you make, even though it probably is, because you can ask it to be like, "Hey, open the window for me,"
And
and
it
it'll
can
do
do
it.
that. Yeah.
You can do that. So again, you know, it's the idea of companionship, but I will, you know, kind of disclaim it by saying it's very much an Asian thing to be this open with
Yeah.
technology because a lot of data privacy issues I can imagine.
Oh, okay. What trend from your research on this topic intrigues you the most and that you think will have the most bearing on how we navigate our future lives?
Not to bring this up again, but it's genuinely the developments around AI companionship. So thinking about AI companions beyond just like a fun thing. You know, when it comes to labor shortages, that's one thing that we're kind of grappling with Asia. The other thing is the aging economy, aging population, sorry. There are a lot of these older solo households as well, whether by choice or not. How are they going to manage caretaking and their health in a society that's traditionally been so dependent on the family, right? So, like, I think maybe it's something that in the West has already been quite common, but here, you know, it's always been the children are expected to take care of the parents, and then the parents are expected to take care of the grandparents. And if you stop having children, what happens? Right? So in China, again, not to keep bringing China up, but China again, there are these new caretaker robots that are starting to be sold on the market, and they're meant to take over like nursing jobs or nursing type of roles at home. So I'm quite curious to see, you know, how that develops, how the relationship we have with robots unfold. Is it gonna be like, are we gonna live in a world where, you know, we're just gonna see robots walk alongside humans rather than humans alongside humans? So I think that's something that I'm tracking and quite curious to see.
We did a podcast actually probably a couple of year or so ago with a founder of a company in Israel, and they've created it's very specifically aimed at the elderly market, and AI-powered robot, sort of humanoid that lives in your home with you. And what was interesting, I mean, they've got a waiting list for this. And we talked about the great positives with this. It's about making sure that they're active and they're using their brains and they've got someone to interact with. But obviously there's a sadness to that as well, because what you would hope is that that was a human. But if there are fewer people and you don't have that more traditional family setup, you can see that this is going to be needed more and more in the future.
Yeah, I just think that, the conversation around this in Asia, which doesn't have that lens of sadness to it. Maybe it's because it's more of a I'm not sh more pragmatic society. I'm not sure all the relationship with technology and robots in general. But people kind of see it as, if I'm a child and I don't have the time and resources to care of my parent like that, I'm glad that there's someone there to fill that gap in.
It's very
And
practical. It's
it's
very
very practical.
practical.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
practical. And I think in some cases, if the assuming that, AI has developed well enough, it can potentially offer more emotional companionship to someone who's living alone, someone who's older than someone, that might be somewhat of a stranger. So there is, I think there's a way to kind of at WGSN we talk a lot about how to make AI more human centric. And I think this is one of those areas where we're really gonna see the exciting new developments.
Can I ask a really weird question
Go
that's
for
just gone
it.
through my head? But as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm thinking, like, when I'm older and, if there's no one to look after me, I'll just have more cats. That's what's going through my head at the moment. Not very practical. I don't think, certainly my cat is totally useless and is not going to be very, and not even particularly affectionate. So I'm not sure why that's necessarily my automatic response. But anyway, are you seeing in Asia a rise in pet ownership? Because we've definitely seen that in the West.
Absolutely. So, couples, as they kind of decide not to have kids, a lot of them adopt pets. Pet parenting is also a huge, huge trend that we're seeing, and it's one of the big booming kind of consumer markets, even, amid this kind of more sluggish time of consumer demand. So it's a big, big opportunity. Lots of pet festivals, and one of the most exciting things recently was, it was recently Chinese Valentine's Day. And there was this little kind of matchmaking session for pets that a brand organized in China. So pet parents would just bring their pets. So that was such a cute way to bring people together,
Yeah,
really.
that is a great way to. I love the fact that we have gone from kind of AI robotics and basically robots looking after people to now talking about cats and matchmaking your pets. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, Alison, a final question for today. Are you more anxious or excited about the future?
Always more excited. You know me. I'm waiting to see how my companion robot turns out. I'm excited to have those conversations, ask ChatGPT about my, horoscope. So I'm very excited.
Thank you so much, Alison Ho, Asia Futures and Cultural Strategist at WGSN. Please do check out our other podcast, Create Tomorrow, with my colleague Cassandra Napoli. But thank you for now. I'll return with a new episode of Lives of Tomorrow in 14 days. My name is Carla Buzasi. I'm the CEO of WGSN, and I'll see you next time.